We're gonna go over literally everything to do with buying your first home, like from the start to the end. We'll talk about saving the down payment. There are some things people don't realize that can affect how quickly you have your down payment and then what you can purchase once you do have your down payment. Also, later in the video, I'm gonna write an offer on a house with you in this video so that you can learn what everything means and how to protect yourself down the road so that you don't get a bad agent or a bad house with issues. We're gonna go over everything you could possibly wanna know, okay? Let's go. Okay, so step number one is, of course, saving your down payment. There are a few things here that are very important you might not know, okay? So first off, the very basics. In Canada, the minimum down payment that you can put on a house is 5% on the first 500,000 and then 10% on the remainder all the way up to 1.5 million, okay? And then after that, after 1.5, you need 20% down. Okay, might sound a little confusing. It's really not, okay? So let's take a hypothetical home worth $600,000. All right, so 5% of the first 500,000 is $25,000. And then 10% of that last 100,000 is $10,000. So add them together and you have a minimum down payment of $35,000. Now this is important. Do you know what CMHC insurance is? In Canada, if you're putting down less than 20% of the purchase price, the bank says, hey, you know what? Statistically, you're more likely to not pay your mortgage at some point. So we're gonna take out an insurance policy on your loan. And just like car insurance, how there's a monthly fee, there's a premium on that too, and they make you pay for it, okay? So they add that premium to your mortgage amount, okay? So for example, $600,000 property, we talked about, you're putting 5% down. So $600,000 minus your $35,000 down payment equals $565,000. That would be your mortgage normally. However, we got the CMHC insurance. So they're gonna add another $21,000 in premiums on top of that. So now the actual mortgage amount that you're borrowing is $587,000, okay? That's what you're gonna be paying interest on throughout the life of your loan. So with that in mind, what percentage should you actually be aiming to put down on your first property? Well, let's talk in real terms here. Like this $600,000 house, if you don't wanna pay the CMHC insurance, 20% down of $600,000 is $120,000. For a lot of people in Canada, by the time you save $120,000, I mean, the prices may have doubled by then. You know what I mean? Or you could be going into the retirement home. I mean, let's be real. If the average Canadian salary is around $60,000, 120 grand is 2 years' income. That's a lot of money. Whereas the minimum down payment is $35,000. It's a lot more doable for a lot more people. If all that you can afford with 20% down is a bad house in a bad neighborhood, my advice is to lower your down payment percentage until you improve your living standards. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so let's say that you saved up, you scraped and you saved, you got 50 grand sitting there, and this is your down payment. 50 grand is 5% of a house like this, sold for $750,000. That's a decent home. Okay, now that same $50,000 is 20% down of this, a one-bedroom apartment that sold for $250,000, and it's not even that great of an apartment, okay? So that's a vast difference in living standards. There's no shame in putting down the minimum, okay? Obviously do as much as you can afford, and obviously you don't have to go to one of these extremes, 5 or 20. You could do 10%, you could do whatever you want. My point is, I personally would increase my living standards by putting down a smaller percentage if I can. Okay, saving for the down payment. Do you want a giant, amazing, awesome tip for saving this quicker and better? Okay, you might know of this already. If not, listen, you need to open an FSHA account. You can open it at any bank. It's a first home savings account. Here are the benefits. One, it's tax deductible. So if you make 60 grand a year and you save 5 grand into this account, they deduct it from your income. So they don't tax you on that amount. So your income tax is lower, or you're just gonna get a bigger chunk of money back from the government in April, which you can then save even more towards buying a new home. Also, the money in the account can grow tax-free. So it's like if a TFSA and an RRSP had a baby, it would be a first home savings account, and it's awesome, okay? You can hold mutual funds in this account, you can hold ETFs, you can hold stocks, or you can just put it in bonds, you can do whatever you want. The downside is two things. One, you can only put in $8,000 per year, and then only a maximum of $40,000 in this account. But even still, that's a really smart way to save for a first-time home. And like I said, when tax season comes, you're gonna get more back, and then you can take that chunk and you can put it away to save even faster. Okay, now there's one other thing that is absolutely detrimental that you remember, okay? Because this can drastically affect what you can afford when saving for a down payment. When you get to closing day, there might very well be land transfer tax that you have to pay. I personally think land transfer tax is the biggest scam on earth, okay? So the government is charging you this fee for buying a house. They just want thousands of dollars in extra tax when you buy your house. In Ontario, if you're a first-time home buyer, you get a $4,000 rebate on that amount. So it's reduced for you, but it's not zero, okay? So let's say, again, we've been using this $600,000 house scenario. So let's say you're buying a $600,000 house. The land transfer tax normally on that is a little over $8,000 that you need to have in cash on closing day. Now they're giving you a $4,000 rebate, so it's cut in half. It's like $4,475. I did the math over there. Still, that's an extra almost 5 grand that you need to have in your pocket, okay? And that's if you're buying a house in this city. What if you're buying a house in like Toronto and it's $1.2 million? Toronto has both provincial and also municipal land transfer tax. One sec. Let's do this. Yeah, okay, I just checked. I'm gonna link a website down below so you can check out what the land transfer tax will be and prepare yourself. But just for interest's sake, I just checked out what it is in Toronto. The average detached starter home is $1.2 million. The land transfer tax on that is $40,000. Now, because you're a first-time home buyer, they'll cut it down to $32,000 to be nice. But that's just an extra fee for buying a home that goes straight to the government. What a scam, in my opinion, to be honest with you. But anyway, I'm going to link down below where you need to go to calculate land transfer tax, because you need to be aware of this when you're saving for a house. You don't want to save up your down payment and then get to closing day and realize, oh my God, I need another 8 grand, 5 grand, whatever it might be. That's a bad situation to be in, okay? So link down below in the description for that. It's ratehub.ca. So at this stage of your home buying journey, saving for the down payment, you should also be doing as much internet research as humanly possible, okay? I am going to share with you an app that you 100% have to download if you're planning on buying a house, okay? It's called the Canada Mortgage app. This right here, this is the logo. This is what it looks like. This app is going to help you figure out how much you can afford. So you can punch in the numbers and it'll tell you what your monthly payment is going to be once you have the house. It's going to help you figure out what the minimum down payment is at every single price range, and it will even tell you how much is left owing on your mortgage after each year of your loan as well. It's a really smart tool to use, and you should use it in concert with your bank's website. So if you go to ratehub.ca or your bank, whether it's TD or Royal Bank or whatever, they're gonna have a little calculator on there. You punch in your income, and you punch in your debts, and you punch in your down payment, and it's gonna tell you what you can afford. Now, fair warning, this might change drastically once you actually talk to a lender, which will discuss later, but it gives you a good starting point. So now you know roughly how much you need to save, roughly how much you can afford once you save that much, and you can see what your monthly payments are in this app. It's really cool. And of course, you should be on Realtor.ca and you should be on House Sigma and looking at what's available, okay? Because you need to figure out what you want. You got to figure out what area of town do you like and how much are people asking in that area of town. Do you want a pool? Do you want a big yard? Are those hard to find? How many listings do you see with those things? Heads up, one thing you're gonna notice is that the bedrooms are always look amazing. They look huge online, right? Because they use the wide angle lens. And then when you walk through homes, they're gonna look tiny, okay? So by the way, that's another thing you can do is go to open houses at this point in the journey. Now, when you walk in there, there's going to be a real estate agent who's going to try and schmooze you into working with them. If you want to be left alone, just say these magic words. You just go, I'm working with an agent. And poof, they will disappear, okay? But this actually gives you an idea of what the houses look like inside compared to what they look like online, which is going to help you a lot when you actually are really serious about buying a home and you're at that point when everything's saved, because you can kind of narrow down your search a lot easier because you'll be an expert by that point. You can also find a real estate agent that you trust at this point to send you listings online in good areas that they know are good or good school districts, which is helpful if you're not in that city. If you don't live in that city, you don't know that city that you're moving to all that well. And they can also show you what some of those houses sold for that you may have seen online or went to the open house, okay? Now, we'll talk more about picking a real estate agent who isn't a jerk and is nice and is actually gonna be helpful and put you first later in this video, so stay tuned for that. But first, we gotta find lending. Step 2, lending, okay? So now you're getting serious. Now you know what you want and you've got a down payment saved or almost saved. We're gonna fill out an offer together later on, and there's some things you need to know, like you actually have to have money on hand the day you write an offer, okay? But before we get there and before we look at homes, we gotta actually talk to a lender. In this step, your mortgage advisor, they're gonna ask for tax documents, income statements, they're gonna ask for letters of employment, and they're gonna look at your credit score. All of this can affect how much you can actually borrow for a mortgage. And they're gonna look at your TDS ratios, okay? This is very important, okay? So TDS stands for total debt service. So it's how much debt are you paying payments on monthly, okay? So do you have a car payment? Do you have a line of credit that has a balance that you're paying every month? Maybe you bought a washing machine on financing from the store at some point. Anything like that can affect how much you can actually borrow. So the bank wants to see all of your debt payments, including your hypothetical mortgage, add up to no more than 40% of your income. Okay, so again, let's say you make $6,000 a month. Well, 40% of $6,000 is $2,400. Okay, now let's say you already pay $500 a month in a car payment. Okay, so now that leaves $1,900 a month. That's what your mortgage has to fit into with interest and property tax. Okay, so whatever house you get needs to be $1,900 or less per month, essentially. That's where you're at. Sometimes they'll let you go a tiny bit over that 40% mark, but from my understanding, they really don't want to see you higher than that. So these are the things that your mortgage advisor is going to look at, and they can even strategize with you if it's too high to get it down and get you in a great position. So now you need to choose who is your mortgage advisor going to be? Okay, so you can either go with a mortgage specialist at the bank, which I think are really good options, or you can go with a mortgage broker. Actually, both options are good, and if you need help picking someone who's really good at what they do, who can really help you and coach you to get things in order and are really good at explaining everything because it can get complicated, you can feel free to reach out to me. I know some really good mortgage people, okay? If you're wondering what the difference is, a mortgage specialist at your bank works with that specific bank. If you already have accounts with that bank, it can be really handy just to go with them because they have access to all your documents. Or you can go with a mortgage broker. They don't work for the banks, but they work with the banks, all of them, to try and get you the best possible rate. Also, okay, this is very important, okay? In our community, sellers will often want to see the pre-approval letter from the bank before or when you're writing an offer. We had a problem for a while, particularly after COVID, with a lot of Toronto agents coming down to our area with buyers that they would say are pre-approved and then they turned out to be lying. So it kind of became a thing here where people ask for the letter because although you're trustworthy, they don't know you at all. You know what I mean? You're just a name on a paper. So I say that just to encourage you to actually lock in your interest rate to get the letter from the bank saying that you're pre-approved. Good job, homie. You're now pre-approved, okay? So your next step is to actually find a realtor so you can start going around and looking at homes, okay? First off, a couple important questions. As a buyer, do you need to pay for an agent? Should you sign a contract with a real estate agent? Can you just use the listing agent of a house that you're interested in purchasing? And then 4, how do you know that they're trustworthy, honest, and they actually have your best interest at heart? Okay, this is big, okay? So first off, I see a lot of people come to town with an agent from Toronto because they just know that person. And they might trust that person, but to be honest, they know nothing about this city. They don't know what are the good school districts, what are the bad school districts. They don't know that just because that house sold for $750 2 streets over doesn't mean this is the same neighborhood. There's differences here. I've seen people put themselves in quite the pickle because they used an agent that didn't know the city they're from. So that's my first tip. Pick somebody who's actually local to the city that you're moving to. So where do you find the perfect realtor for you? Well, first of all, if they have a whole ton of videos online that you've been binge watching that educate you on the city and they've been very helpful, chances are they're very knowledgeable and a really good option to help you purchase your first home, okay? So feel free to reach out right there. I help a lot of people purchase their very first homes. I'm a bit of an expert at it, okay? So feel free to reach out. That's my phone number right there. You can text me or call me literally at any time. You won't wake me up in the middle of the night because it's on silent, okay? I'll just call you when I get it next. You can send me an email, you can send me a text, and we can get the ball rolling on you purchasing your very first home. A few other places you might find a real estate agent that you really like through a friend, okay? If you had a friend use an agent that they enjoyed their experience with, chances are you too will enjoy your experience with them as well. A third option is through an open house. I told you earlier that you could go to open houses if you wanted to, and there'll be an agent there who wants your business, and they'll try and pick you up as a client. It's harder to know if they're actually like trustworthy and a good person because they're not coming referred to by anyone else, and you've only known them for a total of 10 minutes. You know what I mean? But you know, if you give them your email and you feel they've been keeping you up to date on the market and prices and stuff like that, that could be a good option as well. And lastly, if you find a house on the market that you like, you might be asking yourself, well, should I just use that agent that's listing the house? This is a big deal, okay? It's a good question. It's actually illegal in some provinces for a real estate agent to represent the seller and the buyer at the same time, okay? So let's pull up a chair. Let's get into it. Your real estate agent is contractually obligated to work in your best interest. They are supposed to treat your money as if it's their money and to treat you how they would want to be treated when looking for a home, okay? Now, when you walk into a listing and you speak to that listing agent, they are already under contract with the seller and they're already contractually obligated to get the most money possible for that seller. So now, if you trust them to write your offer for you and you're expecting them to help you get the lowest price, but they're also supposed to help the seller get the highest price, how can they do both at the same time? They literally can't. Like, it's just not possible. If you're a buyer and your real estate agent learns that the seller would be willing to come down 30 grand, do you feel that they should tell you that? Because if they're representing the seller, they're not going to say that to you. This conflict right here that I'm describing is exactly why British Columbia has pretty much just banned it altogether. A real estate agent who is listing a house cannot also represent the buyer in the province of British Columbia. In Ontario, technically it's still legal. They just have to get you to sign something saying that you're aware of what's happening, but it's still not something that you would really recommend to somebody. You should have a real estate agent in your corner fighting for you, giving you information as to what the home is actually worth what the market's doing, what could be wrong with the home, if they see anything. All these things you're not going to get, obviously, from the listing agent. So it's important to have somebody in your corner. And that brings us to the last question that we asked at the start of this chapter, which is, should you sign a buyer agreement with a real estate agent as a buyer? Let me show you something here. So this is the Trust in Real Estate Services Act. This is literally Ontario legislation. And in it, it says two important things. And they're both summarized on the info pages about the legislation, okay? So first off, to become a client, you must sign a representation agreement. If you don't want to sign the agreement, you should not expect the real estate agent to provide you with any services like showing you homes. So that is pretty straightforward. If you do want someone to show you homes and look around, you'll need to sign one. And then the other thing it states, which I kind of touched on earlier, is there is fiduciary responsibilities and duties that the agent is legally held to, including confidentiality, loyalty, and protecting the best interest of their client. Which means you can, if you want, go to a listing agent or a real estate agent and say, hey, I don't want to be your client, I just want to be a customer. And then you will sign something that says that you're not a client, you're just a customer, and that the real estate agent doesn't owe you loyalty or confidentiality or anything like that, which obviously doesn't put you in a great position, because if you say to the agent, I would like to be at this price, but I could go higher, they don't owe you the confidentiality of that statement. They could go tell the other person, they'll come higher. Do you know what I mean? I don't know why they would, but the legislation puts forth that if you're a client, you've signed a buyer agreement, they can't share your personal information with other people. There's loyalty, there's confidentiality, there's a lot of things that make sure that they're putting you first. At the end of the day, if you want to see homes and you want someone to give you expert advice on the market, on the homes, what they're worth, what's going on in the market, is this home a good home, then you need to sign a buyer agreement with a real estate agent that you feel is trustworthy and knowledgeable. Whether that's me or somebody else or your cousin or your friend's real estate agent, you got to pick one. Okay, so you've got a realtor. You've found a house you like and you want to write an offer. How do you not get ripped off price-wise? How do you protect yourself from buying a house that might have a ton of problems? Also, there's money you might not be aware of that you have to have on hand the day that you write an offer. Okay, we're going to go over all this. First off, not getting ripped off price-wise. So I'm probably uniquely qualified to talk about this because I did work as a real estate appraiser for a few years. Banks would hire me to appraise the property before they lent on it for a mortgage. Also, I've spent nearly a decade as a real estate agent looking at property every day of my life, okay? Your realtor needs to sit down with you. They need to show you comparable sales in that neighborhood and then adjust for any differences. The difference could be when it sold, maybe the market's gone up or down, could be the number of bedrooms or bathrooms, maybe one little thing is different, or maybe it's got a brand new kitchen, okay? So if the house you're interested in is 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, it's 25 years old, and it's a little out of date, but it's nice, and then there's one that's sold the exact same, except it's got a brand new kitchen. Okay, well, we got to figure out what is our estimated value of a brand new kitchen. How much did this contribute to the value? We know the price of the one you're going to bid on is a little lower than the other one, unless there's been a change to the market. And that's the only place it gets a little complicated. If there's no comparables recently, maybe you find one from a year ago. And maybe you look at what the average price was that month it sold and compared to today. And if it's gone down 11%, adjust the sale price from a year ago by 11%. Bada boom, bada bing, you're in the ballpark. Do you know what I mean? There's always a way around it. Oftentimes, though, if you're within a city, you don't have to do that. There's going to be something nearby built by the same builder, the same year, very similar. Once you find the house you want to offer on and you have a price in mind you're comfortable with based on the comparables, now it's time to write the offer, okay? So let's go to the office and I'll help you out. Okay, so what you see on your screen in front of you right here, this is the offer, okay? It's 6 or 7 pages. We're gonna go through the important things to make sure you protect yourself, all right? So first off, page 1, pretty straightforward. The date, your name, their name, the address, the legal description, and then this here, this is the purchase price. This is where you are going to put how much you are offering on the property. So let's say it's $700,000, okay? So it fills it in right there, and then you go to deposit, Okay, this is important. When you put an offer in on a house, you need to have a deposit available to give to their brokerage within 24 hours of them accepting the offer, okay? Now this deposit, it can be part of your down payment. So if you're worried, like I've saved up this money for a down payment, do I need to have even more money? No, this is part of your down payment, but it just needs to be given within 24 hours. Now here's the thing, okay? It cannot be held in Simply Financial or Tangerine or EQ Bank or Wealthsimple or Questrade or any of those online, not bricks and mortar banking platforms. And the reason is because trying to get the money from one of those institutions to the seller's brokerage within 24 hours is impossible. It's not going to happen. Even if they tell you, like I think EQ Bank does bank drafts, it takes a couple days. You're not going to get it instantly. And you can't often do wire transfers from there. If you do, it takes a few days to settle. It's just not going to work, okay? I've never had that be successful to do it that way, okay? So you need to make sure you have a checking or a savings account at a Canadian institutional bank where you can put that money in before you write the offer, okay? It's very important. So how much do you need to do? So most people are going to be doing $10,000 as a minimum deposit on the purchase of a house, okay? If we get up over $1 million, usually the minimum's now around $20,000. But at least $10,000 is what most people do, and it's going to be payable to Royal LePage, Ontario City. Okay, if we come down here, now this is important. So this is your irrevocability. When you write an offer on a house, legally, you can't take it back. Meaning you can't write it and then change your mind 4 hours later. It's not how this works, okay? Your offer is irrevocable, meaning you can't revoke, until a certain time. So your offer's on the table until this time. So this is where a little bit of strategy comes into play. Some people feel that you should always be giving 24 hours to people, and some sellers will demand 24 hours or 48 hours. I think 48 hours is a little ridiculous. What they're trying to do when they ask for 48 hours is give time for other people to come with competing offers, okay? Oftentimes, you can get away with 4 or 5 hours. You can get away with 8 hours, depending on what their work schedule is. Is it a weekend? Is it a weekday? Are they at work? But typically, I try and have, before you go to bed that night, some sort of answer back from them, okay? So let's say it's irrevocable by the buyer. Let's say until 8 p.m. on today, okay? And then completion date, another word for that is closing day. This is the day that you would get your keys, okay? So what day do you want that to be? You still got to pack, you still got to move. The lawyers need time to do their job. They're going to search the title of the property, make sure there's no issues. So, and then the seller also, do they have a place to live? When are they able to get out of the house? They're going to put on the listing their preference. They might say, hey, we want 60 days. And that's very fair. Most people do 60 days. So the other thing to keep in mind is lawyers don't work on weekends. So this can't close on a weekend. So let's just go, it's going to close December 26th, just before Christmas, okay? And then you're going to sign down here when your agent sends it to you. Okay, so page 2. So this is what's really important on page 2. Chattels included. Do you know what a chattel is? A chattel is this desk that I'm working at right now. Okay, a chattel is anything in the property that's not tied, affixed to the property that you might want included into a sale. Obviously, the most common ones is like the fridge, the stove, the washer, dryer, dishwasher. These things are things you probably want to make sure you write in there and include in the sale. Sometimes people forget stuff like, the kitchen bar stools, stuff like that. And then I always put all light fixtures, even though that's a fixture, it's included. Fixtures, stop. And window coverings, okay? Now, if you come down here, fixtures excluded. So fixtures are the opposite of a chattel. They are tied to the property. They're affixed to the wall, and they are assumed to be included in the sale unless otherwise stated. So the seller might put in there, hey, our Ring doorbell is excluded. We're taking that with us. It's registered to our name and we pay the monthly bill. That's great. There's something we need to include as a clause or a statement in this agreement because of that Ring doorbell, okay? We'll get to that later, okay? But yeah, we'll get to that later, okay? Because some people get really upset on closing day when they show up at the house and there's some wires hanging out of the house and they're like, what the heck, right? So we'll cover that. Rental items. This is another big thing. For some reason, in Ontario, like 95% of people are renting their hot water tank. Occasionally, you'll see someone renting their furnace and their AC. It's up to you whether you want to take on the rental and assume the payments or if you want them to buy it out. For the water tank, almost everyone just assumes the hot water tank rental. It's usually like $25 a month. If it's the on-demand water tank, it's usually double. But yeah, so here on almost every agreement, you write hot water tank. However, again, if they're renting their furnace and their AC, a lot of people will want to get the seller to buy out those contracts so that they're owned for the next owner coming in. But of course, they're going to want to see that reflected in the purchase price up here, and that's where the negotiations come in. It depends on what the market's like. When there was 20 offers on things, people were just accepting and assuming the rentals of the furnace and all that. But in this market, I mean, they should be buying that out for you, in my personal opinion. Okay, HST, do you see this? Listen to me, there's no HST in Ontario on resale homes, okay? So it's sort of silly that this is on the agreement, but we always just put included in the purchase price just in case there was some crazy situation where under the tax code, this particular house does have HST. It's not gonna happen, but anyway, that's what we do. Title search date, you don't really need to worry about. Your agent's just going to put in there a day for the lawyer to finish their job, usually a week before closing, okay? And then we're going to scroll all the way down to page 6. By the way, this page here, this is the page where you're just going to sign. That doesn't mean it's accepted, and if you're a seller, this doesn't mean that you've accepted. It just means you've seen the contract, okay? Confirmation of acceptance. This is the spot where whoever signs this when it's their turn, now we have a deal, okay? But anyway, page 6. This is important. This is where you are going to put all of your clauses. This is where you're going to protect yourself when you're purchasing the property, okay? So let's go over a couple things that need to be on this part of the agreement. First off, just logically and legally, you have to have the balance of the purchase price will be paid on closing. Because remember, we're giving them a deposit right now. And whether the balance of the purchase price comes from you or the mortgage company doesn't matter, but it's got to be paid on closing day. The next thing you're going to want to put in there, unless we're in multiple offers, okay, where you might have to remove conditions, but let's just say you're the only offer on a property, you're going to want to put in a mortgage clause because you need financing, my friend. Now, you're probably pre-approved already, like we've talked about, but the bank is still going to want to do some of their job. And what their job is to make sure what you're borrowing on, this house, is worth it. So they're going to say, hey, if we're going to give you $700,000 or $650,000, whatever the mortgage left is, we want to make sure that is worth that price, okay? Which it should be if you're offering on it. So we're basically, I'm going to show you this clause here so you know how to protect yourself. This offer is conditional upon the buyer arranging at the buyer's expense, if there's any fees to it, a new first mortgage, we'd write first in there, it's satisfactory, this is important, okay? Satisfactory to the buyer in the buyer's sole and absolute discretion. Meaning there's no who, if they come back and they're like, yeah, our interest rates are too high, you can just say, nope, I'm walking away from this property and there's no penalty. Because look at this right here. Where'd it go? Okay, so this offer shall be null and void and the deposit shall be returned to the buyer in full without deduction, meaning you're getting your full deposit back. And how do you get it back? Well, all you got to do is nothing, to be honest with you. So right here, it says, unless the buyer gives notice in writing, not later than 6:59 p.m. on October 6th, which is the day I put in there, that this condition is fulfilled, then this offer is null and void, and you get your money back, okay? So literally, you have to do something to make this go firm. If you just do nothing, it falls apart, which is kind of a protection built in for you, so someone doesn't make a mistake and forget, and then you bought a house you didn't want. You know what I mean? Okay. Next clause, home inspection, of course, right? So home inspection clause is going to be built the exact same way as the financing clause, okay? So you can go get a home inspection. They have to let you in the property, and unless you give notice in writing that you're cool with it, then you're going to get your money back in full without deduction, okay? Now, here's an important note. For both of these conditions, 1 week is usually the standard, or less, okay, in some markets. Every once in a blue moon, I'll have someone ask for 2 weeks, financing condition. That's too long. 2 weeks means you're not even pre-approved yet. That's not okay. The seller doesn't want to tie up their property for 2 weeks as they wait for you to get pre-approved. You should be pre-approved the day that you come to them with an offer, okay? So 1 week, when I advise my sellers to really push back and say no if it's longer than a week, okay? Honestly, you could probably get it done even quicker, though, if you're already pre-approved. It's usually not a problem. You need the week, really, for the home inspection, because home inspectors are often busy and already booked up, right? So you need to give some time to allow for the home inspector to be able to come, all right? A couple other things that I like to put into the agreement to protect you. So one, remember the Ring doorbell earlier? Remember we said hypothetically the seller's taking this Ring doorbell with them? Well, what happens then? Is there just wires hanging out of your house? People don't like that. So I always put in the buyer and the seller agree that the seller will replace the Ring doorbell with a traditional functioning doorbell. Okay, so pretty straightforward. The buyer and seller agree that the seller will replace the Ring doorbell with a traditional functioning doorbell. That way, when you show up, ding dong, you have a house that has a doorbell and not stray wires, okay? Another thing I always put in, listen, legally, you get one final walkthrough, okay? So when you show up at the house, the day before closing, you're allowed to go in and make sure the house is in the same condition as the day you wrote the offer. That's even if you don't put it in writing. Legally, you get that, okay? People often want more than that, right? Usually, a couple weeks later, it's, hey, can I show my mom and dad what I bought? I think you should be able to. That's great. Hey, we need to measure for a couch. Does it fit? You know, or you know, it turns out we're buying a new fridge, or what have you. So people want another way to get in there. So I usually write the buyer and seller. So I usually write, okay, so the buyer and seller agree that the buyer will have 2 opportunities to walk through the property prior to closing at mutually agreed upon times. If it's a long closing, if it's 90 days, 120 days, I'll extend that to maybe 3 times. But again, you also have to be respectful because this is someone's house and they're living there and they can't have you popping by every week, walking through their house because it's a burden to them as well, right? So a couple is good, and I think that's fair, and it allows you to measure some things and see the house and make sure they're not destroying it. So those are the main things that you need to be worried about on the offer. Now, the only thing that I would tell you about is if we are in a market, again, where it's super hot and there's multiple offers on every property, you might have to make some concessions. For example, you might have to highlight this and go delete. You might have to make sure your financing is in order and you're not using a financing clause. You might have to go in there without a home inspection. Now, if that's the situation you're in, I recommend booking a second showing before you write the offer and just do your home inspection then. You know what I mean? If you're really worried and you really feel you need a home inspection, you like the property, book another showing, bring the home inspector with you. No problem with that. Now you don't need a clause and you know what you're buying and your offer looks more attractive. The other thing you can do is if you are flexible on the closing day, right here, completion date, you can always just leave this blank and you can initial beside it. And that way the seller can fill in the day they want and you've already initialed beside it, and they can initial, and there you go. So that's another way to kind of make your offer more attractive if there's a multiple offer situation. However, if we can be frank, at the end of the day, money talks, okay? Would you, if someone was offering on your house, take an offer for 40 grand less just because they're giving you the closing day that you would prefer? I mean, heck, I'll stay in a hotel for a couple days for 40 grand. You know what I mean? So these things can help you out if you're really close to somebody, but at the end of the day, it's this guy right here, the purchase price, that matters the most. Congratulations! You now have an accepted conditional offer, okay? Hopefully it's conditional. If the market is really screwed up like it is after COVID, you might find yourself putting in an offer with no conditions. But the normal thing to do across time has been to put in a financing condition and a home inspection condition. You're gonna have a certain amount of time, probably a week, to get these things figured out. So the first thing you should do is forward the full MLS listing and the agreement that is now signed by everyone to your mortgage advisor that you picked earlier, okay? And they're gonna immediately get to work sending this off to the underwriters in Toronto and possibly doing an appraisal on the property. Your real estate agent should also give you a couple home inspectors that are really trustworthy and reliable. You can call them, ask them what their prices are and their availability, and figure all that out, and then you can meet them at the property on the day of the inspection. Here's what's gonna happen. They're gonna take you through the entire property. It's gonna take anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. It's gonna cost you $500 to $600. They're gonna check the roof, the furnace, the AC, the windows, everything, every component of this house, and they're gonna give you an estimated age and look for signs of wear and tear or any maintenance items you need to keep an eye on once you own the property. They'll pop their head in the attic and make sure there's sufficient insulation and no leaks coming down through the roof. They're also gonna use a moisture meter in the basement, most likely. They just put it along the baseboards and along the walls, and it'll start beeping if it's detecting some moisture, okay? They're also gonna use sometimes this like gun with a screen on it. It's an infrared gun. So it shows hot spots and cold spots. It's the cold spots you're worried about. So this helps them figure out if there's a leak or something going on behind the drywall that you should know about. In fact, I've been to home inspections where the roof looks great, and then you shine that gun up on the ceiling and there's one cold spot, right? Which shows you there's a drip coming in through the ceiling. It's just not enough water to show yet on the drywall, but there's something going on behind the wall. So stuff like that can be very useful. I always recommend using a home inspector if you can. You know, I've worked with people that, you know, they've rebuilt homes themselves. They know what they're doing and they feel they don't need them, and that's great. Then you don't need one. However, for a lot of people, especially first-time home buyers, a home inspection is a very important thing to do. Now, here is something to remember. This is very important, okay? Every single home on planet Earth has something wrong with it. So when you go through the home inspection and you find out, oh, there's this wrong or that wrong, don't freak out. Of course there is. A house has like 10,000 different components to it. They're all depreciating all at the same time at different rates. There's even a brand new home, if I'm honest with you. You ever go with a home inspector through a brand new home, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's things builders miss. There's things that weren't done properly. There's always something wrong, okay? What you have to decide is how big of a deal is this thing that's wrong? How much is the cost gonna be? Should the seller cover that, or is that something that I just have to deal with? Because you're buying a used home, there will be some maintenance things that aren't done that you just have to deal with. But a lot of the time, the sellers should and will remedy the problem prior to closing. So actually, let's go over that. What do you do if you go through the home inspection and there's a big problem? Like something's going on here. Let's say there's a leak coming down from the roof. Your real estate agent is gonna go back to the seller and they're gonna go, look, here's the report from the home inspector. This is the problem. The seller can do three things. They can either fix the problem prior to closing and then provide you with a receipt, or they can get a quote on what it's going to cost to fix it and then reduce the amount of the house by that price, or they can say, we don't want to fix it and it's just not going to work between us, and then both of you part ways. That one's rare. That one usually doesn't happen. The only time that happens is if the problem that they're talking about there's a disagreement as to whether it's really a problem or not. There's some murky situations, but for the most part, if there's a clear, obvious problem in the home inspection, the seller will fix it. Once everyone is satisfied with the home inspection and the financing, you're gonna fill out a form. Actually, your real estate agent's gonna fill out a form called Fulfillment of Conditions, and you're just gonna sign it, and now you have waived your clauses and you have a firm deal, okay? So first off, congratulations, you now have purchased a home. Second of all, you need to know that you cannot get your money back, okay? So if closing day, which is the day you get your keys, is still 60 days away, and you decide to bail on this property, they're not giving you your deposit back. You have entered into a legally binding contract, okay? You cannot just bail on the contract without penalty. There will be penalty. So they can either just keep your deposit that you gave them, or they can keep it and they can sue you for failing to fulfill the contract and any damages they may have incurred from carrying two properties now because you didn't close, or if they sell it to someone else for less money, they sue you for the difference. So it's a very serious thing. You need to make sure you're ready to purchase the home when you remove that condition. I have seen some people who did not have their ducks in a row. They didn't put in a financing clause and they weren't quite sure of their financing or whatever it was, and they walked away from $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 before, okay? You gotta make sure that when you remove those conditions, you're good to go. All right, so congratulations again. You have an accepted offer. You are buying a house, my friend. Now you got a bunch of stuff that you need to do besides pack, which you should start. First off, you need to arrange for a lawyer to close the deal for you, okay? So this is gonna be around $3,000, which you need to have available to pay the lawyer. Your real estate agent should give you a list of lawyers or somebody that they really trust, and you're gonna forward to them the agreement of sale, the fulfillment of conditions, and any other paperwork related to this sale. The other thing that you need to do is you need to arrange insurance on the property, okay? Because of course this is a requirement of the mortgage company that you get insurance. So just like car insurance, you're gonna call some companies and you're gonna get some quotes, and they're gonna ask you a bunch of things that you don't know, okay? They're gonna ask you like, hey, how many feet from the nearest fire hydrant? I don't know, dude, okay? I'll tell your real estate agent and we'll go online and we'll measure on Google Earth. We'll figure it out for you. There's also other things they might ask you that you might not know, including the age of some components of the house, the type of plumbing. You might know that, it's pretty obvious, but you might not. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Just forward the list to your real estate agent and we'll find the answers for you. One thing you might not be aware of regarding insurance is in the early 2000s, there was a company called Kitech and they made plastic plumbing. There was a problem, okay, and a lot of the homes started having leaks all behind the walls, all throughout the whole home. And there was crazy lawsuits, and now insurance companies, a lot of them won't cover insurance for Kitech plumbing, okay? In every city, there's like one or two companies that will still do it because there's tens of thousands of homes that in every city that have Kitech plumbing. Like they're everywhere, okay? Your insurance will be a bit higher. Also, it's been 25 years, almost 26 years since the year 2000. If there hasn't been problems yet, you might not end up having any, all right? But I've sold lots of homes with Kitech plumbing. Just make sure you're aware and understand that your insurance might be double what it would be normally. What if there's something huge that happens before closing, like the house burns down, okay? We're gonna talk about that in a little bit, okay? All right, final walkthrough, okay? So legally speaking, you always get one, even if you don't put it in writing, you always get one final walkthrough. The day before closing, it's important to go through, make sure nothing has changed about the property. You should be buying the same thing that you thought you were buying the day you removed your conditions. So what happens if something has changed about the property, okay? So let's say you walk through and the stove isn't turning on. So you're gonna go back to the seller and you can say, hey man, here's a video of me turning on the stove and it's not working. And the seller is gonna have to fix that, okay? Now, if they protest, because I have had some weird situations where there's an obvious flaw that they refuse to fix, then the lawyers go back and forth at each other. They're gonna end up delaying closing a couple days, but they always cave, it seems, the sellers, okay? Because at the end of the day, you don't have a legal leg to stand on. If it stopped working and it was working before, you gotta fix it, all right? Simple as that. I have seen situations where they lowered the price of the home to accommodate them because they just want, we need it to close today. I'm not going to go, it's going to take 3 days to find a new stove. So here's $3,000 off the price. You know what I mean? But they have to remedy the situation somehow. Here's another question. What if it's something crazy that happens? Like the house burns down before closing. What then? Okay, couple things. Okay, I know what my preference is. There's 2 options. First option is you get out of the deal. No penalty, you get your money back, you're allowed to go. But now you don't have a house, you gotta start all over again. It's a bit of a headache. Here's another option, okay? And I have seen this happen, okay? You can, the seller's insurance will rebuild the property for you. This isn't, I've seen a situation where somebody purchased a home and it was out of date. It needed renos. And then before they took possession, it happened to burn down. And then the insurance company rebuilt the home with a brand new kitchen, brand new engineered hardwood, brand new everything. And they pretty much got a brand new house out of it. And the insurance company covered them living in an Airbnb until that was done. So, I mean, and then, of course, like none of their stuff was in the house when it burned down because they hadn't moved in yet. So in my mind, that's like a win-win, right? But it is disruptive to your life, obviously. But anyway, that's what happens when it's like a really big thing. Insurance companies will cover it and remedy it before closing. So that's it. Those are all my tips for buying your first home in Canada and specifically London. I hope that you've found this video helpful. If you need any more information or you have any more questions for me, you can feel free to reach out. That right there is my phone number, okay? I help people purchase homes in this city constantly, okay? A lot of first-time home buyers. So don't be shy. Feel free to reach out. I would love to assist you in this is a big deal, man. You're going to buy your first home, okay? I would love to assist you in that. So feel free to reach out. You can also send me an email down in the description. You'll find my email and everything. Awesome. Thanks for watching.